This is episode 117 of our road to Unicum, and today I review the Centurion AX. This is the tier 10 British medium tank in World of Tanks. Now, it's been a long time since I played the tier 10 British medium. It actually was 6 years between when I played the FV4202 and then it was replaced by this tank. I only picked it up recently because people were asking about it and I wanted to see how it performed. It was really funny. When I first got the FV4202, I posted on the WOT subreddit that it was my second tier 10 and first tier 10 medium, and the most upvoted response was, "I'm sorry," which was the exact same thing people told me when I said that, hey, my first tier 10 was the IS-4. Now, the Centurion AX did get a couple meaningful buffs compared to the FV4202. One, the top speed was raised from the pitiful 40 kilometers per hour that it was up to 53, and the DPM was also increased. Now, the thing about the speed, so 40 kilometers an hour was pitiful. You couldn't even outrun heavies that were chasing you. 53 is obviously better, but relative to other tier 10 mediums, it's definitely on the lackluster side. And the thing is, this tank isn't particularly fast, right? So there are paper mediums, let's say like the STB1, for example, right? It weighs less, so it accelerates faster, and so it's more agile. Part of the reason why this tank isn't that agile is the fact that it carries a lot of hull armor, but the problem with the hull armor is it's not meaningfully better than the Centurion 7.1's hull armor, right? So the upper hull is like around low 200s, around 210 or so, and the lower plate is only around 110. And those are values that simply don't cut it. Even the upper frontal hull armor won't provide meaningful protection against tier 10 tanks. Now, in this Karelia match, a couple things. So one, obviously, this pivot point where I'm at is pretty flexible. You can shoot at tanks trying to climb up the hill. You can shoot at tanks that are in the middle of the map where our Leo PTA is. And you can spot tanks that are crossing north on the one lane, particularly when they hit the gap over by the F1 area. But you can see that our tanks have pushed really aggressively down the one lane, which can work. And what I've been waiting for is tanks to get spotted on the hill. Our Leo PTA, as long as he's careful about firing, I can provide him with cover fire here. So we put a lot of damage into that T-54 early, which is good. And there are some maps, I find this one to be one of the maps where if you have hill control, obviously that's good, but it's not as game breaking. And part of the reason why, tanks that want to use the western side of the hill to fire on tanks, they're pretty exposed. Right, and so this is one of those maps where even if you don't get hill control, it's fine as long as you can in other areas of the map. And then you can see that our mediums and a couple of heavies have pushed really aggressively down the one lane. Now I'm careful to stay, you can see the white circle just outside of the tanks that are on hill. So even if there are tanks on hill, they're not going to be able to spot me. And you have to really be careful in your approach lines with this tank. Like I said, the frontal hull armor sucks. This tank gets ammo racked a lot due to poor placement of the ammo rack, and the camo on this tank sucks. It's only around, even though I have Brothers in Arms, Concealment, and Vents, which I do opt to run with on this tank over VStab, the camo is still under 26, which is really bad. So even though the view range of 410 is good, the fact that the camo is bad means that you will get outspotted by most of your tier 10 medium peers, right? And light tanks will have no trouble outspotting you. And people seem to not realize this. They're like, oh, tanks like the CAX or the M48, they've got such good view range. I can get the view range up to like 470 or 480 meters. And the problem is that the camo concealment on tanks erodes view range much faster. So, for example, in the Vision game, the Object 140, which I recently reviewed, will outspot the Centurion AX every day of the week. Right, even though the view range on this tank is better, because like I said, camo erodes view range, and that's what matters in vision control. Now, there's a couple things I need to be careful of. If they have tanks that are in the southwest, is that right there that's being clicked on the hill? We need to be careful because they can snipe us, right? And obviously, they have two arties here, so pushing up onto that shelf toward their cap is going to be, a bit of a no-no. So in a situation like this, take the shots that you can, always keeping that barrel hot as much as possible. Take shots as long as you have if you have a shot to take, definitely take it. unless you're waiting for someone to pull in and make a mistake. But keep your gun hot. That's a critical, principle. What I got to be careful here, that obviously this 50 TP is pushing up pretty aggressively on us, and I'm going to back up a little bit. Where that 50 TP is incredibly exposed, and I'm trying to tell our M103, he's tunneling hard. All he's like, oh, I should tank it for me, I got to shoot. And what he's not realizing is he's totally exposed to Artie, and he's very exposed to their tanks up on hill. So he just gave up a huge chunk of his hit points for nothing. And I'm going to go ahead and put the shot into the 50 TP. Now he is tracked, right? And he's got a meaningfully long reload. So I'm going to come up here just enough to be able to get a clean shot on his track and pin him there. The problem for that 50 TP, he's got a couple different problems. One, he can eat flanking fire from our Leo PTA, and he is totally exposed to our Arties, right? And that's why you got to be careful. That's the reason why for example, I'm not rotating counterclockwise up onto the hills. I don't want to get shot at by their Artie. I've already been hit by their Artie, and so I got to be careful here. Part of the problem is both this Leo PTA to my right as well as the M46 Patton are playing as if there is no Artie on the map. Where they are is fine, but you can't be up that high when there's Artie. And the main thing here is to just not force the action. Now, our STB here is going to make the same mistake. The M46 died, and then our Leo PTA pulled back. I take a shot there on the Striv 103. I didn't have a really good angle on his side hull. Even the slightest angle, even the slightest sliver of the side armor, it's butter. That's a green pen all day long. But if you're facing a Striv frontally, sometimes you won't have a better shot. So I just took the shot against his cupola, and I got to be careful here. This UDAS 1516 has got terrific hull armor. Now I make a mistake there. He's clearly not looking at me. He's looking at the STB. I should have come up on the hill just a touch higher to get the gun lower, try to hit his lower plate and get a tracking shot. So that was a mistake. But I would try to tell their Arties, like their UDAS 1516 is the one tank that's keeping them in the match right now because he's able to keep us lit, right? And so I've got a really narrow shot there on the 1560, but notice I get splashed by Artie and then splashed again. So this is a bit of a tough situation. You just got to be patient. You can't force the damage in a situation like this. Right, and our mediums just fed them. Our STB and our M46 just threw their hit points away. We had a good lead. We had a good thing going. All right, but in a case like this, we just got to be patient. Now, what's really been helping us in this match is the fact that our Leo PTA has stayed alive in the middle of the map. Right, and what's fortunate for him is he's been able to hide behind rocks that shield him from potentially getting spotted by tanks that are up on the hill. Right, but by being in the middle of the map, he's basically shut down their sniper's ability to use that hill, right? Because like the T-54, whenever he's trying to come toward the edge of the hill to shoot down on us, he gets lit, and so it's backed them off of the hill. All right, well, their Patton's got a lot of hit points here. Our M48, or sorry, our Leo PTA really should not be trying to cap. He's one shot. You don't want to cap when you're one-shottable, especially since, they have tanks that are going to be able to pressure him. Now, this M48 has been sitting back too much. He's giving me his side armor there. I can back up. I make a mistake right here. I thought these two tanks beside me were protecting my turret enough. So you're going to see me make a mistake here. I'm kind of starting to turn my tank, and I get hit in the side of the turret. And I got to be careful. You can see the tank shooting at me from hill, hit the dirt in front of me. Artie's firing in my direction. And, another shot from Artie. I'm one-shottable, so you got to play like it, right? It's amazing to me that our Leo PT on cap didn't get reset. He really should not have been up there. That's not the right play. Some people will argue it puts cap pressure on. What he was making himself was a totally easy target to kill. And the Leo PTA is really fortunate the M48 didn't take his time aiming in, because even with the lowest roll with APCR, that Leo PTA would be dead. So this is one of those games where, yes, we've got someone on cap, but that's actually not really that meaningful. And they know exactly where he is. That's something I don't like when I'm in cap too. Now, the good thing is, our Leo PTA, the one that's been in the middle of the map, is making a really good play. He's pushing towards hill. Because of this, he spots the T-54. And I'm so far from the T-54 that he can't even he can't spot me. He could render me if I were lit, but given that they only had one other tank, the 183, they didn't have anything that could light me. So here the approach line is really key. I'm going to go ahead as I move up here to move up behind this rock so that the 183 cannot physically see me. And I'm being obviously really careful here because I just don't want to. The artists have been clicking at me repeatedly. Now the nice thing there is I'm going to be able to get a shot off on the 183. before he's going to be able to fire at me. And there you can see the Leo PTA trying to cap is now dead. I obviously don't want to peek the 183 if he's firing Hesh, you know, even or high explosive. Either way, he'll one-shot me if he hits me in the turret. The thing about the turret armor on the Cax is it's pretty good, but it's not great, right? And so the roof of the turret, or the upper forehead of the turret, is around 285 millimeters of effective armor, which is really good until they start slinging heat, and then, you know, you're a green pen to them. Okay, I can see here through third-person view that the 183 is not looking at me, and I managed to put him down. It's also noteworthy that the turret cheeks on this tank are around 250 millimeters of effective armor. So it's not a large area. Those cheeks are kind of, the vulnerable area is a little bit smaller. But the point is that you can't totally rely on the turret to protect you. It'll provide pretty good protection, but I find turrets like the 140, 62A to be far more reliable and durable, because the only place you're meaningfully going to get penned on those turrets is, especially the 140, is the cupola, but you can hide that with good wiggling. And you can see there, you know, even with premium, you know, that match was a loss. And granted, you could say, well, you were running a large repair kit. That's true, but even in a, you know, pretty good game on my part, a fairly meaningful carry, you can see that the, you know, the ability to make profit at tier 10 is pretty tough, and that's even firing 100% silver ammo. Okay, so this tank is definitely not good enough to be where our RHM Panzerwagen is. He's in the correct position. I think the only thing I was a little worried of when he was there is whether or not he's fully in the bush, right? So it looks like he's a little bit exposed on this side. The problem is he won't get spotted by tanks to the southwest of him, but if they have a tank go up by F8, right, there's a rock and a bush there on the hill. Yeah, I was just looking at my left. They can counter-spot the RHM Panzerwagen. Okay, so it turns out the Panzerwagen is correctly in the bush, so good for him. You do have to be careful. Sometimes people will blind fire the very tip of the bush where the RHM Panzerwagen is. So that was a good, you know, first kill. Their heavy should not have been on the hill. I can understand the T-57 going there, but the 257 doesn't have gun depression. It's not really a position he can make very effective use of. The biggest risk in this match from the north spawn is always the heavies making it down the 9-0 area. You know, they can get hit by crossing fire. What I've tended to do from the south spawn is to go in the riverbed over towards the E9 area to spot their tanks as they're crossing, because, you know, they're going to be flat or perpendicular to our snipers that are over by the C4, C5 hill. But I want you to take a very careful look at the minimap now and tell me, based on the situation, where you would go. Right, so a couple thoughts here. First of all, their tanks aren't meaningfully exposing themselves on that southern ridge, so down by G5. Well, of course I say that, and then their 140 happens to get spotted. But the real vulnerability, if you look at our deployment here, is our one lane, right? So we can see they've got two autoloaders on the one lane, plus an AMX-30, right? Our PZ has a long reload, right? And so he's also kind of got a big tank, so depending where he is, he might be artiable. So the real flaw in our deployment here right now is the lack of strength on the one lane. Now, the best thing that I can do, and one of the strongest positions from a defensive perspective on this side of the map, is the A1 corner, right? There is a rock with an adjacent bush, so also has a very good field of fire. You can fire into the castle area, and you can fire diagonally to the southeast if their tank's playing that middle ridge. What I want to do here is support the PZ, try to keep him alive. You know, obviously, while he's alive, you know, he's a very large bundle of HP, so that's going to take some time for them to wear him out. But being here, you know, offers me another field of fire that our friendly tanks don't have. So I'm able to cover the western side of that middle ridge. And you can see our PZ is already down to about 40% of his health, right? But what's really good here is I'm firing at a distance, and there are some intervening, you know, trees and bushes between us, is that they may not spot me. Even with the crappy concealment rating that this tank has, they don't see me. And if they spot me, it's fine. I can just pull back behind that rock, wait until I'm dropped from vision, and then resume firing. Okay, so they do take out our PZ, and this is what I expected to happen. When I flexed over here over a minute ago. This is the read I was making, right? And one of the most important, there's a couple things that you really need to be able to do if you want to help carry matches. So number one is obviously, pay attention to the location of enemy tanks on the map, but just as importantly, pay attention to the deployment of your tanks on the map and recognize where they're going to have a numbers advantage. So this Manicore, despite his fantastic camo, he was conceding the first shot advantage to me because I'm the one sitting in the bush, right? And so in that particular case, even though I've got really poor camo, I'm going to outspot him. What he's doing is making a big mistake. He's now making the same loop repetitively, so it's really easy to predict where he's going to be. And, what he should have done after I hit him the first time is just run away. I'm sitting here with full hit points, behind a position of strength. He doesn't have the DPM to take me out. And unless his AMX and TVP and 5120 come with him, it's not going to end well for him. Now, what his tanks could have done in the meanwhile, while I was brushed back from the rock, that would have been the right time for them to push if they were going to do it at all. Right? But the thing is, you either need to go or you need to not go. And the problem with the Manticore is he went, but he was the only one, and then he stayed in too deep. It would have been okay if I wasn't at full hit points, and if I didn't have the Skoda and the Striv, helping to provide cover fire for me. And you can say, well, how does the Manicore know that they're there? It's like, well, if they haven't been spotted yet, you always have to assume that there are tanks on the North Hill at C5. If you're from the south, or if you're in North Spawn, you have to assume that they're going to be where the Conway is now, which is around that G5 area, or maybe one squared to the north. Now, you might be wondering what I'm doing pushing up here, right? This can be a bit of a risk, but I'm making a bet that they've backed off because they don't want to push into a hull down Cax that's sitting behind a rock. That's just a terrible crossing for them to try to make, and they're going to eat arty fire on the way. And I can already tell that their 5120 showed up in the middle of the map, so he already backed off to move back to where the Conway is. Now, there is a risk, obviously, the TVP can take out 2/3 of my hit points with a full clip. And, we don't know where the AMX is, but, I'm making a calculated gamble. And sometimes you got to kind of read the situation and anticipate what they're going to do. So I anticipate they're going to back off because they're not going to be here where I am. But this is really still a very close game. Here I can set up for the first shot advantage. That T57 is caught in a really tough position, right? And based on where he's taking fire, it's very likely he's going to back up into my field of fire. Now, our Striv 103 is doing something pretty unorthodox. He's actually playing the middle ridge going from west to east, and he can do this because they don't have anything on the eastern side of the map that can shoot him. He is obviously very vulnerable to arty. I wouldn't really recommend being where he is, but he's made it work, and now we got another autoloader off of the map. So people are already kind of pre-aiming or pre-firing because they obviously can see my tank moving behind the wall while I'm still lit. This is really dangerous. I don't want to just peek out bare. This is a mistake I see people make all the time. This is too exposed. I am reversing out to sidescrape. Now, this is one thing that the tank can do. So while I think largely the hull armor is terrible and you'll get ammo racked a lot, the spaced armor on the sides of this tank are pretty good. And so you can bait a lot of shots that will just get eaten up into your tracks. Now, the main thing is I put one shell into that 5120, right? So he's potentially one-shottable, or more likely two-shottable for me. I don't like what I just did. I backed away from the rock, right? And the problem with that is I'm letting him come too close to me without getting shot. I should have stayed near that corner so that the second he was visible, I'd fire and put a shot into him so that he would be one-shottable. It's a small mistake on my part, but in hindsight, watching this recording, I realized that was a little bit sloppy on my part. And same thing there, just backing out sideways like that, like I just did in front of this window, that's a little bit of laziness, right? But what I'm trying to get a sense is where their mediums are. I have to assume that the Conway is still over by the F4 position. That's the last time he was spotted. But this is what's really important here, is to think about how you approach your approach lane, right? And so I was getting shot at probably from the Conway and from their mediums, and so the problem here is I have a large crossing to make. If I want to push down the one lane, I'm going to have the same issue that Manicore did, which is I have to cross a lot of open ground, and there isn't much working hard cover, especially if you consider that they'll have multiple angles of fire. So think for a moment where you would go in this situation. And you also have to consider the position of our friendlies on the map, right? So our 50B and T30 are waiting for stuff to get lit. Our Striv really isn't built to be a spotter. Obviously he's non-turreted, and in order to fight effectively, he's got to enter siege mode, right? And so what I'm doing is instead of pushing down, going down the one lane would be a mistake in this map, right? And it's pretty clear right now, but our 50B is a big squishy blimp. He doesn't want to push, so he's waiting. That's the smart thing to do. And our T-30 is a little reluctant. Really, we need someone to get down to K6. That's always kind of the flex point on this map. If one side is pushing toward the south, you want to get into that riverbed. And so I'm going to take just a quick pass here to see if I can spot that Conway, and I haven't. But really what I want to do, I'm taking a clockwise loop so that I can push down the riverbed, right? And the idea is you want to put yourself in a position where if you do get spotted, hopefully only one or at most two of their tanks will be able to fire you, right? If I move down that one lane, that's a pretty long stretch of ground. So our T-30's gotten the memo. He's pushing down to K6. This is good. I still haven't spotted the Conway. He could still be back there, but at least he's not on the southern tip. He's not over by G5. Okay, so we've got the TVP lit, and then it looks like my shot went into the dead body of our 268B4. But thankfully our Strib is in a really good position to take out that TVP, and then now it's just the AMX 30, right? And again, just taking my time. Approach lines are everything. I'm going to go ahead and you see all their arties were clustered and they were sitting out in the open. Again, just absolutely perplexing. If you're arty or you're a TD, just find a bush. It does amazing things. You won't get lit. It just baffles me that people just make such common mistakes. And again, not to kind of beat up on arty players, but a lot of people tend to play arty, or they play arty because they do better in arty relative to other tanks. Right, or to put it a different way, it's easier to contribute as arty. If you're in a tank like mine, you have to know what you're doing. So the CAX, I would say overall, it's limited, right? It's very, very good hold down. The fact that you can't play vision games effectively because the camo is so bad really limits what you're able to do. I found both the STP is way better, right? Even though the whole armor STP sucks, it's more agile. And I know it's bad. The problem with the CAX is you think the whole armor will protect you, but the frontal armor just is flat out unreliable against your 9s and 10s. And compared to the 140, for example, the 140 can play vision games all day. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Let me know what you think of the video and the tank. Take care.